neighborhood, health care, and opportunities to work. I think sometimes we minimize that. You know, for most of human history, most of the people on earth accepted the fact that they were poor and that they had no choice about what they did for a living. Just the very fact that you're in these chairs today and you could be doing something else for a living, you could be somewhere else today, reflects a choice that we take for granted. A choice that is relatively new in human history. And we're losing social mobility because fewer people in this country have those choices. And it's up to us to figure out how to bring them back. So I would like to start with a few general thoughts and then go to some specifics. First of all, I do know something about this subject. I was born right after World War II in the state, Arkansas, with the second lowest per capita income in the country. It was only 56% of the national average. We're doing much better today, but still one of our congressional districts, which now comprises almost half the state because of depopulation. I read a report yesterday that said it had the highest percentage of low-wage workers in the United States, the 4th Congressional District in Arkansas, 28% of the people. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I worked my way through college and law school. At various times, I have done a lot of interesting things. I've cut lawns, worked in a grocery store, set up a used comic book business. That was the dumbest decision I ever made. I had 2 beautiful trunks full of perfectly preserved comic books that I sold, and I thought I was a rich person. I made about $100, and if I'd saved those things, they'd be worth $250,000. But that's part of making life's decisions. I've cleared land, I've built prefab houses. I was 22, the guy I was working with was 67, and he asked me if I really believed that someone had been on the moon. He seriously doubted it. He said, you know, they can do a lot of things with television. When I was in law school, I used to serve subpoenas. I served subpoena once in a high-rise that I had to walk up, and on the 3rd level, I'll never forget it, there was a heroin addict there with a needle sticking out of his arm, zoned out. He was poor too, in more ways than one. When I became governor, the second time, the first thing I did after getting elected was go to the Singer sewing machine factory in Northeast Arkansas, which built the wooden cabinets, those beautiful old sewing machines, back when the whole area was covered with hardwood forest, and then it was largely cleared for rice farming because of the water and the soil. And I shook hands with 600 people who were walking off a job for the last time and didn't know where their next job was coming from. In the middle of the country, the 1980s were pretty rough. Growth was fairly robust, but largely confined to the coasts. And we had an unemployment rate above the national average. Every month, I was governor for a decade until I ran for president, when all year long, Arkansas and Nebraska vied for which state was growing the fastest. It took 10 years to turn that economy around. I know how hard this is, which means not that we should be discouraged, but that we should get to work. As Bob said, when I was president, I tried to do something about it. People ask me all the time what I'm proudest of. And usually I say at home that we created 50% more jobs in my 8 years than in President Reagan, but we moved 100 times as many people out of poverty. That's policy. It is not an accident, and it should convince you that this can be done. We can do this. There is really no excuse for the neglect we have shown, especially to our children. We can do this, and it isn't that expensive. In 1972, I think it was, 71 or 72, the Congress passed and President Nixon signed a bill to index Social Security to inflation. And there's a big debate now about whether we did it right and all that, but there's no question it helped a lot of poor people get out of poverty. Since that time, in 40 years, there's been only one period when the child poverty rate dropped much more dramatically than the senior poverty rate and got closer, sadly not even to, but closer to the senior poverty rate. That's the 8 years we were there. That can be done. It's a matter of policy. That's why this meeting is important, and that's why that book is worth reading. We can give all the speeches in the world, but somebody's got to do something. The other thing I'd like to say is, this is what I've learned from all this experience. Intelligence and effort, the willingness to work, and dreams are pretty well evenly distributed throughout the world. I work in some of the poorest places on earth now, in Africa and remote areas of Latin America and Southeast Asia. And I'm just always surprised when I run upon some country genius. It reminds me of being a kid growing up in Arkansas. They're just out there. What is not evenly distributed are opportunities, preparation, and the supportive environment necessary to succeed. Second thing is that no one policy, no new bright idea, no new technology alone can deal with this, which is another reason I like the book. There is no silver bullet. And not everything we do will work. If you had 100% of the people in the Congress that agreed with you, and we got 100% of the things we want, we'd make mistakes. So we need all hands on deck. That's the third thing I want to say. There is a mountain of social science evidence that shows that when people work together in diverse groups, they make better decisions than when geniuses act alone. We do need business, government, and the non-governmental sector. We need liberals and conservatives. We need manufacturers, farmers, and high-tech entrepreneurs. We need small businesses and social workers. We need religious institutions and community organizations. We ought to be able to agree that it's a bad thing for a kid to grow up in poverty, and that it's a bad thing for a working age person to be disabled from work. And then we ought to agree at least on most of the things that would help to empower people and remove barriers. The fourth thing I want to say is that we should listen to poor people and look at their surroundings. Poverty has many faces and unheard voices. And what happened in West Virginia, where they've had a 2/3 decline in coal employment before the president's EPA announced their proposal, is different from what happened in the Mississippi Delta, where we, in employment terms, never got over the demise of African American farmers and the mechanization of agriculture. Is different from the Native American reservations that are just too far out there and don't have casino gambling. It's different from urban poverty. It is important. They need not be patronized. They don't want entitlements. What they really want is empowerment. And we need to give them policies that provide that. One of my favorite projects that my foundation does is work with really small farmers. I mean, average farm an acre or two in Africa. I am convinced that this effort by rich countries that have lots of money but can't feed themselves to solve the problem by leasing or buying land in other countries, throwing the small farmers off, mechanizing it, using up the topsoil in 2 or 3 years, and then moving on someplace else would be a calamity for the world. So we are trying to prove that these small farmers can be highly productive and can feed their people and eventually can participate in exports. We have one project in Malawi which will soon have 100,000 farmers in it, but we just got the first results from the first 20,000. And we basically give them an agricultural experiment station in the form of a bigger farm. And then we order them higher quality but much lower cost seed and fertilizer. And we take their crops to market. You talk about poor. People that live down bad roads with no wheel transportation have to pay somebody else to take their crop to market, and they charge regularly 50% of their income to take the crops to market. And they never really know unless they have a cell phone whether they got a fair price. So we take the crops to market, and we have storage facilities, and we sell it for the best dollars we can get. Anyway, I was out there looking at one of these projects, and we had people coming in because they just had a drought, so we were trying to show them how to use the corn shucks from the previous year's crop to shore up the soil so that when they watered it, the water wasn't lost and the soil wasn't lost. And I was watching this woman digging. She farmed an acre of land with a handheld hoe. She didn't even have a long hoe. And she looked up at me, and she didn't know who I was from Adam. You know, some old white guy coming around telling her what to do. And she said, so I asked her a question. She said, you think you could do this? I said, yeah, I know I could. She said, why do you think that? I said, because I've done it. She said, I don't believe you. Plant my row. So I said, okay, give me the hoe. So when I finished planting her row, she felt enormous dignity. She felt empowered. She felt that she was in an endeavor that might make a difference in her life. We can do that everywhere in America. You know how many people out there, and a lot of them, by the way, they're not predictable in their voting habits. The strongest support that the Tea Party has is often in rural America, where a friend of mine from the Arkansas Ozarks, in a place that's not bursting with prosperity, and I called him the other day and asked him what was going on. He said, we got problems. I said, why? He said, because I just talked to a guy who's a bellwether here, and I said, will you vote for us this time? He said, I don't know. He said, I know the Republicans aren't going to do anything for me, but the Democrats aren't either, and the Republicans don't seem like they want to do anything to me. In other words, the guy thought he was invisible to all of us. He really thought he was invisible. So you're out there on your own, and all you got, you're hunting and you're fishing and your friends, and you just, if you're going to be let alone, just let me alone. I'd rather be helped, but I just don't believe anybody cares anymore. There are a lot of faces to poverty, and we have to listen to them. The fifth thing I want to say is that culture matters. The conservatives are right about that, but I think often the definition is too narrow. For example, the Harlem Children's Zone works because it's a cradle-to-work system. Jeffrey Canada is about to begin a well-earned retirement. It works because the needs of people at every stage of life are considered and people work together. A few years ago, when Nevada instituted a new rating system for its schools, the highest ranked school in Las Vegas, in Clark County, was the charter school Andre Agassi set up in the poorest neighborhood in Las Vegas. And there were a lot of the standard things. They had a code of conduct and a dress code and all that. But the main thing they did was keep the dadgum school open all the time and insist that the parents of all the poor kids come to the school, learn how to use a computer, use it at night for job training opportunities and for exploring other things. And they created a community of support, and they made the parents feel like they were doing a better job and they can actually contribute to their kids' education.